My name is Sarah.
Awesome, we'll just start off. Can you start off with telling us a little bit about your childhood?
I don't have many memories from my childhood. I think that I've intentionally blocked out large pieces of it. But what I do remember of it are feelings of fear and hopelessness. As cliche as it sounds, I did not have a good relationship with my mother growing up. There was some abuse involved, and I remember I would hide in my closet to try to escape. So that was a rocky time in my life. But there was one thing really good that did come out of that, which was my relationship with my little brother. It started out as me trying to shield and protect him, and then as we got older into our later teens, it turned around into him playing that role for me.
When you were a kid, do you remember what your dreams were as a kid or your aspirations as a kid?
I think my dreams as a kid changed. There are definitely times where I dreamed of just getting out of the house and being on my own. There was a time that I dreamt of being a doctor, but mostly just wanting that freedom.
Would you mind telling us about your relationship with your dad and the general emotions associated with that relationship?
My dad was a great human. He worked a lot, so he didn't spend too much time at home, which was understandable. For a large period of my childhood, I resented him for not believing me about what would happen. But ultimately, he was someone that I really respected, and he always demonstrated his values and passed along those values to me, which I'm incredibly grateful for.
If you could attach a feeling to that relationship that you can relate to, what in one or two words, you and your dad, what's the emotion there?
Admiration. I have a lot of respect for who he was, how he carried himself, and how he provided for his family.
Would you mind telling us more about your relationship with your mom and the feelings associated with that relationship?
My mom had a tough childhood herself. She grew up in an abusive household, and so some of that carried over. She would sometimes get physical. I think what hurt the most, though, was things that I was told. Being told you're deaf, stupid, mute, don't have a heart, have a cold rock instead of a heart. Those things get to you. I was scared of her. And I hated the hypocrisy that I saw at home. I hated how she preached one thing. She was religious, and then at home, I don't feel like I always received that same love. So I had a lot of resentment for a very long time, and definitely had to let go of past experiences in order to be able to forgive her and have the relationship that we do today.
What would you say you learned from both of your parents?
From my father, I learned the type of person that I want to be. Hardworking, caring, able to show emotions, and really generous with both love, kindness, attention. From my mother, I learned the kind of person that I don't want to be. A lot of my life, as it is now, has been intentionally modeled to be the opposite of what I saw in her and what I received from her.
Could you tell us about your first love and how that first love felt? It can be anything you associate as your first love. So it can be a person, it can be a hobby, it can be a thing, it doesn't matter, just whatever you connect to that.
Mm-hmm. Growing up, I largely thought that love was a myth at best, because in my experience, the people who claimed to love each other were the ones who hurt each other the most. The person who taught me what love was is my brother, Daniel. And we had an amazing relationship. There was no one with whom I felt more connected. And that is truly what taught me what unconditional love is. We would have done anything for each other.
What were some of the ways that you were able to know how your brother loved you? What were some of the things he would do, or the feelings, or that connection that you had?
My brother was always there for me, no matter what. If I needed something, even though he was younger than me by 3 years, he would be the one that I'd go to first. He protected me near the end of my time at home. He advocated for me. He would get himself in trouble to help take some of the heat off of me. And even when he had his own things going on in life, I knew that if I were called, he'd always pick up the phone and he'd always be there.
Could you tell us about your first loss or heartbreak and how that felt? And it's the same dynamic, whatever you associate as your first loss or heartbreak.
Yeah, can I have some water? Just a bit. Okay, thank you. Thank you for being patient and understanding. It's scary to show someone a piece of your heart. All right. I would be so grateful if you would repeat the question for me, please.
If you could tell us about your first loss or heartbreak and how that felt, whatever you associate as your first loss or heartbreak.
The first time that I lost someone in my life was my grandfather. And I was still fairly young. I think I was between 11 and 13 years old when that happened. And it was the first time my eyes were open to, this is what happens. This is the conclusion to life. It hurt. It reminded me to tell the people that I love them, and check in on people. I'd say, the greatest loss wasn't yet to happen, but I'm sure we'll get to that.
What's love to you now versus what love was to you as a kid? If that love has changed, what's the differences between them, and how do those two different loves feel?
Mm-hmm. Nowadays, love is so much more than blood family and romantic relationships. I think love is a way that you express yourself with most people that you encounter. It's a way that you can intentionally choose to express yourself with the people that you encounter in life. It's this giving of kindness and respect and acceptance, and taking the time to see people as they are. With my relationships with friends, love is being authentic and showing up when they need them, or when they need it the most, and reaching out in advance even when they don't express that they need it.
Now, the next question you may have already answered it in regards to your brother, but the next question would be, who first taught you love and how? Would be your brother, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us about what a general good day looks like for you?
A good day involves walking out of the house into the sunshine, going to the yoga studio, being able to practice, maybe going on a trail run afterwards, eating good food, and wrapping it up by spending time with my friends.
Now, the opposite of that, what's a bad day look like? How do you push through that bad day?
Sometimes I struggle with my mental health. There are periods of time where I experience depression and anxiety. So on the bad days, it's hard to get out of bed. I don't want to be around people. I'll sit at home. How do I push past it? I think being aware of the signs, resisting the urge to stay in bed, instead of secluding myself, reaching out to a friend to let them know or ask if we can share space, as opposed to staying at home, getting outside and being active, or going to practice yoga.
What's a person or an event that's shaped you, good or bad? How does it feel when you reflect on that person or event?
The death of my brother shaped me for the better. It will be the greatest loss I ever experienced. And in life, I truly believe that there are always these things that get thrown at you, and it's never going to stop. That's just how life is. There's good and there's bad. But the beautiful part is that We get to choose our response, and we can either use those experiences to become a better version of ourselves. And that doesn't necessarily mean doing it alone. I had a lot of help along the way. But I was able to use that experience to become stronger, to care for others more.
What's inspired you and why?
I'm inspired by genuine, kind, authentic people. Because everyone has had something bad happen in their life at some point. And being able to take those situations and turn them into kindness. I think that if we all could harness the power of those negative situations, positive situations, whatever they may be, it would just make, those cheesy as it sounds, it would make the world a better place. I think we're all just trying to do our best. And so I love meeting those individuals, hearing their stories.
What's been a humbling experience for you?
That's an interesting question.
What would you describe as humbling, as being humbling?
I think I define something as being humbling when it forces you to reconsider your views or your actions. So,
We can go to the next question.
okay, thank you.
So this question, you can answer in any way you like. So go in your mind and think, this life event can be mental, physical, or spiritual. If you can tell me about a time in your life that you can relate with the word war.
After my brother's passing, it was a really dark year. And I wasn't sure if I would ever be the same or be normal, or if people would ever view me as anything other than a sad girl. That first year especially, I was at war with my thoughts, my mind, and I was literally fighting for my life.
Can you go more into detail of that war? How does that war look like on one day? One day out of that war, how was one day in that war?
Following my brother's death, everything looked different for a while. I didn't have any hope. Everything looked much bleaker. Most days I didn't want to be alive either. So, daily, I was fighting this internal battle, just telling myself to go, like, 1 more minute, just 1 more minute, 1 more second. And it wasn't pretty. Thankfully, things got better with time, and I was able to find some more hope.
Where did you find that hope?
I found hope in several different ways. One of my boss's wife had lost her father to suicide. And she was so kind as to talk to me, someone she had never met, over the phone, and describe her experience in great detail. And it was horrific. But she reassured me that I'd be able to get through it, and that I would be different at the end, but I would learn how to manage it and move forward. I also realized very quickly that I needed to work with a therapist. So I worked with one probably for a year, if not longer. And she helped me work through my feelings of blame and self-hate and get to a point where I could make peace with what had happened.
So same type of question. Go in your mind and think this life event can be mental, physical, or spiritual. Tell me about a time in your life that you can relate to the word peace.
I can relate to the word peace every time I show up to my yoga mat. After an hour of matching breath to movement and finding this meditative movement, it helps to clear out any of the unsettling, uneasy, so-called negative feelings, emotions, thoughts, and helps me come back to a place of feeling grounded and centered.
Can you tell us about a truly difficult time in your life, how it felt, and how you endured?
On October 17th, 2016, I woke up to a message from one of my brother's friends. They were supposed to see him over the weekend, but they hadn't been able to get a hold of him. So I jumped out of bed really quickly, and I tried calling Daniel. And immediately, it went to voicemail. And in that moment, I knew what had happened. We had this strong connection. And I felt that it had been broken. I had to wait several hours to get a call from the police confirming what I knew. My brother had taken his life. My brother was a really social person. He loved people. He loved to laugh. And after college, he moved to a really small town and he became really depressed. And he hid his depression from most people. Even his closest friends didn't know. But I knew, because we'd talk. We'd cry on the phone together for hours because I could feel his pain. The next hours, days, months were absolute agony. I felt like some piece of me had been ripped out, and I desperately wanted it back. I wasn't able to sleep. I couldn't eat. I didn't even change my clothes or shower most days. Naturally, it was really hard on my parents as well. My father's heart literally broke. A few weeks later, while he was sleeping, his heart stopped. So, within a matter of weeks, I lost the two people who had meant the most to me. I think losing my brother was my absolute worst nightmare. I take some comfort in knowing that the worst thing that I could experience in life has already happened. And I've made it through. Coming back from that was really hard, though. It took a lot of intentionality and the desire to want to get better, because I was filled with so much self-hate and blame. Like, how could I not have prevented this? Why didn't I call him? Why didn't I go see him? And thankfully, I've found healing in the answers to those questions. I wasn't responsible as much as I wanted to. There's nothing I could have done to save him. Losing someone to suicide is incredibly complex. There are many different layers to the grief. And I wouldn't wish that kind of pain on anyone, to be honest with you. As far as how I've endured, I began to make changes in my life. As I mentioned, I went to therapy. I did the work on myself, on my mind. I took a break from my job. I went out on disability because I wasn't able to function for a few months. I went to yoga almost every day to make sure that I was still taking care of my body. And I'm so lucky that I have close friends who were there for me. I had one friend who would let me come over anytime. She gave me a key to her house. We didn't have to talk. I could sit on the couch all day and just watch TV with her and not say a word. And that was perfectly okay. I eventually changed careers. Prior to the deaths in my life, I was someone who was so type A and driven, and I wanted to see how far I could get, and I was always pushing myself and working harder, and not for money or recognition, but just to see what I was capable of. And after their passing, I couldn't handle stress quite the same way. So I decided to change jobs to something that was less stressful and had more of an emphasis on helping people as opposed to how much I could help the company that I was working for. And the combination of all of those different elements, the people behind me, taking care of my body, taking care of my mind, taking care of my work-life balance, were done intentionally so to bring me back to a place where I am so happy that I experience happiness, I experience joy, and I'm glad I'm alive.
So I know you talked about earlier, how deep your connection to your brother was, and you felt that connection was broken. At least here in this world. There are other ways that you feel connected to him now still. And then the next question would be, what are some of the ways or some of the things you do to honor his life?
How do I still feel connected? What are things I do to honor his life? My brother was a beautiful human, and he chose really, really beautiful friends. Some of the ways that I still feel connected to him are through the people that he chose to surround himself with. One of his friends specifically sends me a Christmas card every single year, which I cherish. It makes me feel closer to him, getting to see her be so successful and thrive in life. I still think of my brother regularly. I used to have internal dialogue with him. I don't do it as much nowadays as I'm learning to accept and let go. And that's not to say that I don't love him. He'll always be a part of me. I tell lots of stories about him. That's how I keep his memory close to me. And thankfully, the people who I choose to surround myself with love me and and listen to the stories. The second half was...
I think you got it.
I got it. Okay, great.
So next question. What's the most joyous moment you've ever had in your life? And how did that joyous moment feel?
For me, I think that joy is found in the little things in life. Not big milestones, not one singular day or event, but it's something as simple as seeing a train go by, walking outside on a warm summer day while listening to music, laying in the park, reading a book, finding street art or something that someone has scribbled on the side of a wall somewhere. It's the ability to laugh at myself. That's where I find the most joy in my life. And very intentionally so. I have worked to recultivate this childlike curiosity and wonder, because I think that joy and happiness, it comes from inside us. It's not dependent on external situations. It's something that we choose. That being said, it's all around us. We just have to look for it and tune into it and acknowledge when those moments happen.
What keeps you going every day?
Life has taught me that sometimes a lot of bad things happen. And I don't think that there's any deeper reason for it. I think it's just a natural part of life. But life has also taught me that things get better. And even during times where we might not be able to see the light, the joy, the happiness, there are people around us who truly love us and care for us and want us to be here and present and happy and healthy. So even on the bad days, I try to remind myself of the army of people that I have behind me.
So imagine you're in the hospital today with only hours to live. What would be your regrets, if any?
I hope to not have any regrets. I think that if we're trying to project or predict regrets between now and death, there's so much time and opportunity to turn that around. I think that if we look to the past, I think it's more important to try to find peace with what's happened instead of ruminate on what might not have happened or what went wrong. I think on my deathbed, I would rather be thinking, I hope I cared for my people sufficiently, and I hope they all know that.
You told me what your dreams were as a kid. What are your dreams now?
My dreams have become a lot more simple. I just want happiness. And I think life experiences taught me that what we think might bring us happiness isn't always what's going to bring us happiness. And what might bring us happiness right now doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to bring us happiness later in life. So I want to have this flexibility in understanding that life will play itself out. And however that happens, I can intentionally seek out happiness along the way.
You're the co-author of your life book. How do you envision your picture perfect ending, like just a scenic ending? If it was theatrical book, how would you be like, man, this is it right here?
uh, the ending would be I die, and then there's a big party, and everyone's celebrating because they all know how much I love them. The end.
Old age.
Oh, I told myself I wasn't crying. I did.